Welcome to The Humble Philosopher. So this is the third episode of this channel. Obviously, just getting it started. But part of the reason for me starting this channel personally was that I've been getting a lot of these videos in my feed on YouTube, something along the lines of "There is no free will." So Sam Harris, Robert Sapolsky, Bernardo Kastrup. And that just hits a chord for me for whatever reason, deep inside this idea that there is no free will. And to me, I can't see any real way around there. There is free will. And now, to be clear, any iota of free will is free will, is the existence of free will. So when somebody says we have no free will, if they then hedge that, if they then equivocate on that, they're not really making that argument. In other words, free will isn't necessarily free will over everything, but free will over anything is the existence of free will. And so I have this, it's just sort of deep in my psyche, this belief that free will is central to the entire phenomenon. I actually, as I've been thinking this through in the last couple of months, based on seeing these videos, it's coming to me that there would be no conscious experience without free will. That free will is central to the experience of life. So what I want to do today is do just sort of like a reaction video, just a short little clip from Bernardo Kastrup. And I was thinking that through just today, and I came on to something that I think is actually a very powerful argument against determinism and for free will. It would be one of these things that would be very difficult for determinism to explain. So I'm just going to let him, make that argument real quick. Excuse me, I am the humble philosopher, so I am humbly on Zoom because I don't have, it's not within my free will to have all this technical expertise so many other people seem to have.
If we had absolutely free will as individuals, we would, each and every one, be completely happy because we would choose to will whatever the circumstances are that we are living through. Even if you are in solitary confinement, serving a life sentence, you would choose that that's what you want.
Yeah.
And you would be the happiest man on the planet.
Or at least it would be the smart.
Now, that seemed, for starters, that's an assumption. That's not even an assumption. That's a conjecture. That's an experiment none of us can run, or none of us would want to run, even if we could. And so he's just sort of saying that if we truly had free will, we could, even if we were in solitary confinement, we could choose to will that that's what we wanted. And so that seems to me a straw manning of the idea of free will. And again, that's saying that free will only exists if we have free will over everything and not just free will over anything. And so I was thinking that through today. And I was like, that's like saying, if I had free will, I could will to lift Mount Everest over my head. But since I can't, then everything's determined. And that's ridiculous. So, the next thought I was having was, even, free will only has to mean that even if everything was determined, even if you put me in that solitary confinement and I had no choice in the matter and everything was just, lockstep, second by second, minute by minute, unfolding as it had to unfold. But I had a hat on and it had a red light and it had a green light, and I could choose the red light when I wanted to, and I could choose the green light when I wanted to. That would be sufficient for free will to exist as a, ontological thing, in the universe, right? Now that's just sort of an absurd analogy, But the thought that then came after that was, we've all seen a movie um, where somebody has been paralyzed and they're completely paralyzed, and they come to and they're in a hospital somewhere and they have no way to communicate. People are asking, who did this to you? What's the secret codes? Whatever it is, however it is, it's used in the movies. And they have to communicate with the person. And all that person can do is blink their eyes. All that person can do is blink their eyes. That's all they have control over. And what happens each time that comes up in a movie? They use blinking eyes, blink once for yes, blink twice for no. And they create a language based on being able to blink one's eyes. There's actually a book. I saw the movie adaptation. I believe it was called The Butterfly and the Bell Jar, The Bell Jar and the Butterfly. And it was about a man who had a really nasty stroke. He had like a brain aneurysm, and it completely paralyzed him. And he was stuck in the hospital. He had been a really vibrant person up to that point. I guess somewhat self-involved, if I'm remembering the story correctly. So this was a real story. This really happened. And what he did in the hospital with, the help of his nurses, was to create a language through blinking. And he wrote a book. He wrote the book, The Butterfly in the Bell Jar. And then eventually died. But he was able to write his own memoir just by blinking his eyes. Now think about that. Think about how this, absolute modicum, that's not the right word, but this just little sliver of free will, being able to blink one's eyes, can give birth to an entire language. That is a window enough for language to flourish. And in order for language to flourish, yeah, I mean, imagine, just as a thought experiment, there's a way to paralyze somebody absolutely completely, so that you completely take away their free will from their body, but they still exist. There's no possibility of language in that situation. But you give that self, that conscious being, one iota of free will, such as the ability to blink one's eyes, and an entire language can flow from that. Two souls, two experiences can bridge the gap with just that little bit of free will. And so this is an idea I have. I call it the redundancy of illusion, right? There are two main problems that I have with anybody who claims to any sort of determinism and no free will in any real sense. One is, it's impossible to live from, right? You just can't. You wake up, you feel like you have free will, you go through your day, experiencing choices, right? The choices will still be there. You can take away the chooser, you can take away the choice, but the choices themselves will always be pointing to this idea that there's free will. So it's an impossible thing to live. Nobody who claims determinism can live in congruence with their own claim. And, maybe it's not even a separate point, but the other way to look at that is that there's this redundancy of illusion. And, just language itself is shot through with the illusion of free will, of an agent that's using language in a meaningful way and is picking and choosing the words, the way to go at whatever level, right? I mean, there are many levels of metacognition, such that as I'm speaking now, I'm choosing to speak, but I'm not choosing each individual word as it's coming out. but still there's a choice. I could choose just to clam up, or I could choose to continue to speak. So there's this redundancy of illusion where, we're running afoul of Occam's razor when we say that there's no free will, because instead of one illusion, the illusion of free will, then going away and reality then flowing forth, what we have are trillions upon trillions of individual instances of the illusion of free will everywhere we look. Sticking with language, think about the period. What does a period do at the end of the sentence? It tells the reader to pause. It tells the reader to stop. Why would that period be there? What would be the purpose of that period if the reader has no free will? The period itself speaks of free will, right? The reader has no free will. Well, the reader's either going to stop or not stop based on some predetermined set of forces that trace all the way back to the beginning of time. And so there you have, just a period at the end of a sentence being one more redundant piece of illusion, right? Or sticking with Occam's razor, we have free will and we can choose to obey the period or not. And everywhere you look, you will find instance upon instance upon instance upon instance of things in the environment pointing towards your having free will, all of which would be redundant were free will not to exist at all. And so, I just, think about that, as a thought experiment. You could paralyze somebody's body to the point that they still exist within that body as a conscious entity, but they have no control at all, no free will over that body at all. And there is no room for language. You give them only the control over their eyelids, and all of a sudden, all of language can flow, be it very difficultly, nobody's saying that free will is free will to make everything easy and to choose all of your states and the extent of those states at all times. So, this is just the way I put together information. That's not the complete argument. But I think Kastrup is way off there, and what he's done is he's made a straw man of free will, and then he's attacking that straw man instead of, free will is free will over everything, and not just free will is free will over anything. But as this thought experiment that's just sort of developing as I'm speaking it here shows, is that the necessary precondition for language itself is a state of free will over anything. If you have free will over anything, then the conditions are present for language to flow. If you have free will over nothing, then there is no condition for language at all. And if there is no free will, language itself would be another large redundancy of illusion shot through with millions and billions and trillions of instances of that same illusion, all individual phenomenons in their own right. And so this would be as far away as you could get from Occam's razor, or just one of the pre-existing conditions of existence and of the universe is the possibility of free will over anything, any one thing, not everything. And if there's that free will over just one thing, on, off, eyes open, eyes closed, then from that, all language can flow. And I think that's a much more powerful argument than, we have no free will at all. So anyways, hope that makes sense. Hope that's useful to somebody. Thank you for clicking on this video.